Mercedes-Benz seems to launch a new generation product every other week, but a whole new nameplate, well, that's a far less common occurrence. So, say hello to the GLB SUV. The latest model spun off its compact front and all-wheel drive platform, which also underpins the A-Class and the CLA. Now, the GLB, as you can see from its boxy upright design, is unashamedly practical. It claims to have B-Class MPV levels of interior space and flexibility, but with a far more appealing and palatable SUV design language. It also has one particularly cool party trick, which is, despite its relatively diminutive size, the option of a third seating row, at least for those below 1.7 metres tall. Now, it arrives in Australia around July of next year, but to get a bit of a taste ahead of time, we've come to, well, not so sunny Spain to check it out. So, without further ado. Mercedes claims the GLB's proportions, quote, underscore the off-road focus, end quote, of the design. Though let's be real, this is an urban crossover. As with all modern Benzes, it has smooth forms without character lines. The upright front, large side glass house that kinks up near the C-pillar, and flared plastic wheel arch enhancers ensure you won't confuse it with the smaller, more car-like GLA. Its 2,829mm wheelbase is unusually long for a car of this size. For extra context, while the car overall is a little shorter and narrower than the GLC, which, by the way, is based on a different rear-wheel drive platform, it's taller and so has more headroom. The interior will look familiar to anyone who's seen the new A-Class, so the GLB has unique aluminium add-ons separating the upper and lower parts of the dash and acting as door armrests. Turbine-like air vents and optional wood panelling make for the ideal look, at least to my eyes. That dash features two 10.25-inch screens mounted side by side, one for the driver's instruments and the other for infotainment. Everything is controlled by the MBUX conversational voice control system, or by touch, by finger pads on the steering wheel, or by the trackpad mounted along the transmission tunnel. While the base GLB models are 5-seaters, the optional 7-seat layout is the newsy bit. The middle seating row split folds 40-20-40 and each portion reclines. The bench sections also slide 60-40 on rails by up to 140mm. Mercedes claims almost a metre of rear legroom, and the high roof and big windows do indeed make it unusually spacious in the rear for a vehicle of this size. The stowable third row seats fold into the floor and when in use can fit anyone up to 168cm tall or 5'5" using the old measure. In other words, it's best for kids. The rearmost seats each have ISOFIX child seat anchor points as well, and the side airbags reassuringly go all the way along the cabin. It also has a bloody big boot, with up to 570 litres capacity in the 5-seater version. 3 versions of the GLB will go on sale in Australia, all using petrol engines. Demand for the diesels to be offered in Europe is just not there in our market. And unlike the A-Class, even the base GLBs get independent rear suspension. The GLB 200 has a 120 kilowatt 1.3 litre turbo and front-wheel drive. The mid-range GLB 250 4MATIC has 165 kilowatt 2 litre and on-demand all-wheel drive. The 200 has a 7-speed dual-clutch auto, while the 250's DCT has 8 speeds. While off-roading is clearly not something most buyers will attempt, the front-biased all-wheel drive system can send up to 50% of torque rearwards, and stay that way via what effectively amounts to a locking centre diff. You can also get a mode that adjusts throttle take-up and traction control for slippery surfaces and hill descent control. The flagship is the GLB 35 AMG, which has a 225 kilowatt 2 litre turbo, variable all-wheel drive that can send up to half the engine's outputs to the rear wheels, and an 8-speed DCT enabling a 0 to 100 km/h dash in 5.2 seconds. Befitting its sporting character, you also get adaptive dampers to change the ride stiffness, speed-sensitive steering, and various traction control modes. Right, so the car I'm driving is the GLB 35. I think the engine in this sort of Tier 2 AMG car is pretty well judged. Even if you put it into its sportiest setting, which I just have, the exhaust is never quite too ostentatious. It pipes noise into the interior, but it doesn't sound particularly fake. But it's also not, you know, over the top. It's sort of a slightly more tempered approach, which I quite like. 0 to 105.2 seconds is not hanging about in anybody's language. This all-wheel drive system has plenty of grip. It's really, really responsive. Even on these sort of slippery, treacherous roads that they've got us driving on, it's felt pretty composed. It also feels pretty hatch-like through corners. It's not the most agile car in the world, but it doesn't roll around like a traditional SUV. It's quite tied down. It's quite refined in terms of its noise suppression. Probably the most surprising element, though, for me is its ride quality. I mean, the smallest set of wheels on any GLB I've driven is 20 inches, and I think this car's on 21s. And despite that, you know, going over potholes and ruts in the road, which we have found from time to time, it kind of glides, surprisingly. You sort of brace yourself for impact and it just floats, which is surprising and not something that every AMG model can claim to do. I think that longer wheelbase helps with the balance of the car. Obviously, when there's more distance between the wheels, it can feel a bit more planted, especially through corners. So dynamically, I think they've really nailed this car particularly well. I also think that the outward visibility in this car is much better than a lot of other cars I've driven lately. The huge side windows, the relatively slim A-pillars. It's really easy to see out. And I'll give a nod also to the active safety tech. Mercedes-Benz has updated the radars and the cameras in this car. So the semi-autonomous level 2 stuff, like the system that nudges you between the road lines, is really, really good, as is the augmented reality sat-nav system. So look, again, on a first drive, you're never going to find as many quirks as perhaps you will after spending longer behind the wheel, but all told, I'm walking away from this really, really impressed with this car. Right, so on these international launches, we can't pretend to get our heads entirely around a car. It really is about first impressions only. But on that basis, it's pretty hard to deny that the GLB is going to be a popular addition to the Mercedes-Benz range. Clearly, it's going to appeal to people with a couple of young kids who may want the flexibility of that third seating row. And given that it really looks the part, it's got pretty impressive road manners, that really ritzy new high-tech Mercedes interior design language, it clearly fills an obvious gap in the range, especially when you consider the GLA is a bit more sporty and youth-focused, and the GLC a bit more premium and upmarket. Anyway, go to caradvice.com as always and check out the written component of this review for more information. And as always, let us know what you think and ask any questions you might have in the comments below.